This week we are on Lab 8, and this is the lab about the nervous system. And there will be a lot for you to do in this lab. And I want to make sure that you know the parts of what you're supposed to be learning and where they are in the body. So we're going to start on page 85, and yeah, we're more than halfway through the lab manual. By the way, next week, it's not just a quiz about the neuro lab. Next week, you need to take the lab midterm, and it covers everything in the first half of AP 120 lab. Wow, big, right? But you also need to know these things. So on page 85, we have got the parts of a neuron. I don't know if you've listened to them yet, but in lecture, we are learning the neurophysiology, or how your nerve cells, which are called neurons, do their thing. And we will be learning the parts of a neuron in this week's lab. After that, we will be learning about the spinal cord. Now, the neuron, that's this thing, that's one nerve cell. You cannot, if I had it right here in front of you, you could not see it. It's way too small. This is what we might see through a powerful light microscope. The spinal cord, you would only be able to see it, of course, if you were doing like an autopsy on a person. And we will be doing that. Those are both on page 85. You do not have to identify the parts of a sheep's brain, because we don't have those for you to dissect. And then on page 86, those are all the parts of the human brain that you need to know, right? So let's get going. Let's start right up at the top. Every neuron or nerve cell, every neuron or nerve cell has got different parts to it. Let me just, I'll go here. Let me just draw for you. Yeah, I know I can't draw. Right? So, oops, I did not mean to pick that. Okay, so that is going to be the cell body. The cell body is the part of a neuron where the nucleus lives, right? And these parts that are bringing information, these parts here that are bringing information in so that the neuron can think about it, those are called the dendrites. And then this part where the neuron is sending that information outward, that is called the axon. This is also in my lectures. Also, at the end of the axon, there will be little axon terminals. Let me just erase this a little bit, okay? At the end, so here's going to be my axon. At the end of the axon, there are these little axon terminals, and the axon terminals will come in contact with the cell body of the next axon in the line. This is important context. Let me show you why. This is a difficult image to identify. This is actually one of your lab models, but you're not in lab right now. But this part right here, this is the cell body. And these parts here, these are all of the dendrites. Those are the dendrites. And it is the job of the dendrites to receive information from other cells at synapses. And it's the job of the cell body to think about that information that they're getting and decide, hey, do I think this is important and I want to send it along or not, right? Now, where are the dendrites getting their information from? The dendrites are getting their information from these guys, the synaptic knobs. Now, the synaptic knobs, in lab, they're just these rubber little pieces, but The synaptic knobs, they are attached to an axon from another cell. So see how this synaptic knob, let me go back one, right? That is the synaptic knob of this cell, and it would be depicted as like it would be depicted as like just that on that model on this slide. Okay, so this is the end of another neuron's axon. And that other neuron is like, I've got information to share with you, and it shares it through these synaptic knobs, which are part of the axon terminus. Axon terminus really just means the end of the axon. There's our axon. Well, that's just the beginning of the axon. Now, this area, the axon hillock, this is where all of the decision making has come to a head, and the first voltage gated sodium channels will open right there at the axon hillock. All right? So far on page 85, we're starting at the top. The cell body, we know that that's what this is, right? Let me get a highlighter. Oops. Laser pointer, okay. This is the cell body. That's the nucleus of the cell body. These guys are the dendrites. That's a dendrite. By the way, these dendrites, they have also been chopped off. Chop, chop, they don't really look like that. They really would be really long and weird. But in order to make a model to sit on your lab bench, which I know you don't know what that looks like, but in order to make a model that would sit on your lab bench, if these guys weren't chopped off, then they would be like 8 feet long. So we don't make them 8 feet long. We make these guys chopped off. And then the axon could be a mile long. We don't have room for that. Okay. So in order to make it to scale, we've got to cut these things off. So dendrites, the axon starts here at the axon hillock. And if we went all the way down it, and we do have a little bit more to look at, if we went all the way down it, at the end of this axon, there would be axon terminals, synaptic knobs like that, because this axon is this cell's way of sending out information. And at the end, its little feet look like that. And this guy's little feet are touching other nerve cells, right? So axon hillock. Now, here's what the axon, a little chunk of the axon looks like. Like I said, on your model, this is about 1 foot long. To make it really to scale, it'd be like 1 mile long. So we got to make a little chunk. So this part right here actually this part right here, this part right there, it would actually fit right here, okay? So it's an extension of the axon. So the axon is here in the center. Let me do that in blue, maybe. The axon is here in the center. So what is all this other nonsense? Well, if you remember from the lectures, we talked about myelin sheaths and saltatory conduction, and this is an example of a myelinated axon, which means that there are Schwann cells. There's the nucleus of a Schwann cell. There's the nucleus of a Schwann cell. And Schwann cells, while you're still either inside of your mom or it finishes up when you're a little baby, it wraps itself multiple times around the axon, and it makes this stuff called myelin and tucks it away in all these little layers here. And these little layers are known as the myelin sheath. All right. Oh, one more thing. The place where the Schwann cells are kind of, it gets drawn different ways by different artists. Let's try not to get too stuck on that. But it'll either be shown as naked axon, that's probably not right, or it'll be shown this way as an area where even though this Schwann cell is touching this Schwann cell right here, but technically there's no myelin in that area. That is known as the node of Ranvier. And by the way, remember, you just have to spell things right. So it might help you to refer to it in your head as the node of Ranvier, right? So that's it for the neuron. Now, examine a slide of a multipolar neuron. There will be no microscope images on your lab midterm. Reflex arc, we'll get to that really late in this set of lab lectures. Let's talk about the spinal cord at the beginning of the next lab lecture.